Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille Show. It's Jerry Miller. It's good to be with you on a Thursday, a rainy Thursday across Charlottesville and Central Virginia. We hope to bring a little clear sky and a little positivity with an interview with Delegate David Toscano here on the I Love CVille Show. I'm excited for this interview, looking forward to it. I'm very grateful for this gentleman giving his most precious commodity, his time, to us in a 60-minute setting where we're going to try to showcase, the human side, the personalized, the localized, the humanized side of David Toscano here on the I Love CVille Show. All I ask is if you give the show a like and a share, whatever channel you're watching, that would mean the world to us. 4 of us work very hard to put this program on for you. Before we get to the delegate, let's first thank some of the fantastic folks that make this program possible. Interstate Pest and Service Companies is a 4-generation strong business. It started with 1 truck and 1 man making phone calls to his customers from a phone booth in Charlottesville. Today, it's a Commonwealth-wide business with offices in the Valley, in Richmond, over there on Harris. And ladies and gentlemen, it started here in Charlottesville. It's the kind of entrepreneurial journeys and the entrepreneurial stories we love to spotlight on I Love CVille because they embody the best of our community. We also want to give some big-time thanks and some big-time props to the good doctor, Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. I was there this morning. Scott Wagner is changing people's lives, 1 adjustment, 1 treatment, 1 physical therapy, 1 sports medicine plan at a time. It's Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. Judah Wickhauer, Harris Tolber, and Lauren Linsky help make this program possible. I have the easy job. All I have to do is talk into this microphone. Harris Tolber is our director. On that note, Senor Tolber, if you can go to the studio cam and if you can welcome David Toscano to the set, that would mean the world to me. First, I want to truly thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I would love to get to know you before we get into your political career and your law career, which is they're esteemed and highly regarded. I'd like to get to know you from a personal side. What are your passions, your interests? How do you like to spend your time?
Wow. Well, what I've been doing for the last 25 years is spending my time in public service. But, what I really have a passion for is I love to travel. I love going overseas. I love Venice. I love art museums. I love to eat at local restaurants.
Me too.
I love to play golf occasionally. I love to read. I love to write. And I love being with my family. And if I can do all those things at the same time, man, I've got a great day.
You would have to clone yourself, Delegate Toscano. We haven't figured that out yet.
No, well, it's coming, right? Next 100 years.
It's definitely coming. How does a Syracuse, New York boy find his way to beautiful Charlottesville, Virginia?
Well, it's the strangest thing. I went to graduate school in Boston, and after that, I decided to get myself a job teaching with the University of Maryland in their overseas division. They had they have a division that teaches U.S. military service people and their dependents. I was young. My wife and I had just been married, no kids. We said, we're going to Europe. And we went to Europe. They send you around to different air bases and army bases every 8 weeks to teach courses. And it changed my life. But when I came back here, I didn't have a job. So I came to visit my parents-in-law who had retired in Charlottesville after being away for 20 years. He was the superintendent of the schools here in Charlottesville in the aftermath of massive resistance. He helped open up the Charlottesville schools.
Wow.
He left, came back here to retire. We came to visit him, and on that next Monday, I walked into the University of Virginia Sociology Department and got myself a job. And we stayed. And that's how we ended up here. Serendipity.
I love it. Serendipity for sure. Your wife, Nancy, of 45 years, you gave her, I think, the best thank you in your retirement speech. I have your retirement speech in front of me. I thought, you're a tremendous writer, undoubtedly just a fantastic writer. You call her your wife, your partner, your confidant, your advisor. May I ask about the love story of how you and Nancy met and how you and Nancy became a partnership?
Well, we met in Boston. She was we were both at Boston College, and that's where we met. And we never looked back. I mean, we enjoy the same sorts of things. And she's very accomplished in her own right. I mean, she was the founding webmaster at UVA.
Really?
Yeah. When it first began, she was right there at the beginning.
And that's a male-dominated industry at that time, I would imagine.
It was huge.
Yeah.
She's a director of publications and became the founding webmaster in the mid-'90s. So she's been around the block, too, for in terms of service. And we have a son who's 21 years old, and he's at VCU and loves the
Go Rams.
He loves the vibe in Richmond. He loves the urban setting, studying African American studies and languages. He's probably going to have a double major. So we get to see him fairly often, and you know, we have a wonderful family.
I often say that, and it's going to be very difficult for me to move from Charlottesville. The business is called I Love CVille. How am I going to take this business somewhere? I'm here at CVille long term, but I often say if there was a place that I would move to, it would be Richmond. What I love about Richmond is the big city feel, yet it has the walkability and intimacy of a small town. I love the little neighborhoods like Jackson Ward or Scott's Addition, Shockoe Bottom, Shockoe Slip. I love the grounds around VCU. You must love Richmond as well.
It's very, very hot, and between great restaurants and the art scene, it's a wonderful place for a young person to be, or someone like me who occasionally I'm young at heart, and I enjoy all that stuff.
Charlottesville, Virginia. Talk to us about your commitment, what it means to you. I mean, you served at the local level. You served as a mayor. You have a sense of civic duty and civic pride that I think a lot of folks don't. You've built a career around that sense of civic duty. Talk to us about Charlottesville in general, what it means to you.
Well, you know, it means everything. Charlottesville is one of those special places anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world. And the thing that really appeals to me about Charlottesville, it's large enough to have a cosmopolitan element to it. Good music, good art, good restaurants, but small enough where one person can make a difference. And, you know, when I got involved in local government, it was clear that one or several people could make a difference in changing the character of the city. You know, one of the things that I was involved in when I was mayor was the revitalization of the downtown mall. That was in the mid-'90s. And I'll never forget the time where this developer asked me to go have coffee with him. I was mayor, and he sits me down. He says, David, I want to build a skating rink.
Lee Danielson?
Yeah, Lee Danielson.
Okay.
And I'm saying to myself, this is Charlottesville.
Right.
This is the South. I said, you want to do what? He says, I want to build a skating rink, and I want to build a lot of stuff around it. Movie theater, restaurants. That was the beginning of the revitalization of the east end, of the west end of the downtown mall. And there's another story about the revitalization of the east end.
I would love to hear it.
So that occurred also while I was mayor. We'd gotten a big federal grant to create this bus transfer center and intermodal facility. We originally wanted to put it on West Main Street at the train station, which we're getting money to revitalize at the time, but it just wasn't working. We couldn't make the deal work with the developers. And one day I'm standing outside City Hall with the Department of Economic Development officer, and I said, why don't we build it here? And that was the beginning. The bus transfer station was built, that beautiful building.
It's gorgeous.
The revitalization in front of City Hall, we pulled the street up. There was a street that ran through there, and that led to the building of the pavilion. And you know what happened then. Everything explodes.
Like gangbusters.
Yeah, so these are things, you know, little decisions that get made at the time make a huge difference in the life of a place. And sometimes people think that great cities just happen magically. Not like that at all. They're a product of decisions. That's why people have to make the right choice when they go and vote.
I love it. I love it. That's a sizzle reel. Let's start it from the East End, his evolution of the East End to the West End, Harris Tolber. Like and share the stream wherever you're watching, whatever channel you're watching. Delegate Toscano is giving us some fantastic knowledge here on the I Love CVille show. You spent a number of years at the local level here in Charlottesville.
14.
14.
I'm sorry, 12.
Okay, and some as mayor, some on council. When did you start realizing that, you know, I may want to go a little more vertical here. I want to get into the House. Talk to us about that mindset.
Well, you know, I don't know when it started, but we had a great representative, Mitch Van Uries. He served over 20 years in the House of Delegates, and he was an institution here. And nobody really thought he was going to retire. But, you know, people get older and they decided they want to do something else in their life. And I had thought, as I was doing this council work, I was saying, well, look, you know, there's some things we can do in Richmond that will make the city a lot better. There are things that we can fight for in Richmond that will make things better here. And so I left council in 2002, and Mitch was still there. And I thought, well, if he ever retires, I might run. And, you know, that's how it happened. He retired, and I said, oh, I'm stepping up. I'm going to try to run. And I was fortunate to get the nomination. And then I just keep getting reelected every year.
I have interest in getting involved civically. And I'm going to ask you a question where I'm going to try to learn from you. Time commitments, the conversations you have with your family, the potential distraction from the law firm, your law career. We're talking about, you know, your most precious commodity, all of ours, is our time. And allocating the amount of time that you are doing, which is significant, there are some opportunity costs to that. Can you put that in perspective for us?
Well, yeah, for anybody who wants to get involved, first of all, I say go for it.
Okay.
But you don't have to always go for it in terms of seeking an elected position. There are lots of boards and commissions in both the city and the county where you can cut your teeth and make a big difference in a way that it doesn't require you to invest the time and energy that you would in an elected position. So I started with what was called the Social Development Commission, which was a commission in Charlottesville, and we looked at a lot of issues arising out of race relations, of all things. But that's where I started. It was an appointed commission, and I got appointed to that commission. And as I stayed there, I began to look at the council, and I said, well, I can do what they're doing. And it sort of led me into my effort to run for city council. But it does take a lot of time. You know, I remember
How old was your son?
He was born in the January before my last election campaign for council. So I'd sit up, feeding him in the middle of the night, watching the Golf Channel, and thinking about what my next forum was going to be like. It was, you know, I'll never forget that. You know, I'm not sure. Maybe I wouldn't have run if I'd really known what that was going to be at that time. But yeah, he came along in 1998, and we're the luckiest family in the world. I mean, he's adopted, and we got him at 10 hours old. So
that's amazing.
Very lucky.
That's amazing. That's a sizzle reel right there, Harris Tolber. Like and share the stream, guys, no matter the channel you're watching. And offer a question for Delegate Toscano. I'm happy to relay it to him. Charlottesville, how have you seen it evolve and change? And that's a very broad question. I'm looking for perhaps first the positives, and then we'll get into maybe some specifics.
You know, that's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about it because I'm writing this book. And it's about 25 years. And the city's changed a lot in those 25 years. The development in and around the city has been pretty incredible. West Main, I mean, if you looked at West Main in 1981 when I first got here, I mean, there's no comparison now. The university has grown, I mean, lots of people say it's grown a lot. It's grown some, and it's grown to such an extent that it's generating a lot of issues with housing and such. But the big growth has been in the county. And the population in the county, I think when I first got here, might have been, I'm not sure, but it's probably, you know, it's increased by 50%. And that's where the real big growth has been. Now, the city is more cosmopolitan now. It's got more festivals than ever before. There are some downsides. I mean, some people are being crowded out of the city because of the cost of housing. And we still have, you know, big problems with big racial problems in the city. But I think we're a better place now than we were 30 years ago.
Why do you think that?
Because I think there are more interesting people here, and there's more energy of all level here. And I think that's good for a community, because if you don't bring in new energy all the time, or cultivating your own energy inside the city dies. And that can happen in the space of a decade.
For this business turns 11 in May. And for, I'd say, 9 of those years, David, I have been razor focused of working 80 hours a week, waking up at 4:45 in the morning, and just getting stuff done. I wasn't going to say stuff. Getting stuff done, okay? Focused on growing the business. The last 2 years, as we have had success, as we have, had good clients working with us, my mindset's changed a little bit. I think it has happened to coincide with also fatherhood and being a husband. And it's changed and pivoted more toward a social entrepreneurship mindset where I feel personally and as a owner of a business that my job is to give back to this community and make it better. I'm torn on some things. One of the things I'm torn on as a capitalist, as a conscious capitalist, is the affordable housing piece. Mm-hmm. Charlottesville is 10.27 square miles, and it's landlocked by Albemarle County. The cost of a home in Charlottesville, as we all know, is astronomically expensive, and the taxes that coincide with those assessments are also astronomically expensive. What is our role? Open-ended question. From the affordable housing game, I mean, do we have skin in the game? Does everyone have some kind of skin in the game?
Well, everyone has some kind of skin in the game. And of course, a lot of these decisions get made within the context of government because a lot has to do with what kind of zoning you have, right? I'm one who believes very strongly in density in cities. That's what cities are about. Sometimes we think that everybody should live in a single-family home and should own it. But in reality, people don't have to own their home, and they don't have to live in a parcel that's 1 acre with a nice fence and a lot of grass. Not everybody wants it. Not everybody needs it. What we need to have is decent housing at a reasonable price that people who live here can afford to pay for it, and you can't do it without creating more density.
Sure.
So hopefully what the city will do, and again, I'm not on city council anymore, not on the planning commission.
Sure.
It's been years since I've dealt with all those issues, is to create an environment where then the market can take over and build what needs to be built.
Does that mean regulation?
Well, it could mean regulation, but if you put the zoning pieces in play, they will build it. Now, so let's take an issue now that's before City Council. And again, I don't presume to know the answer to this. Friendship Court. Mm-hmm. We've got a major private person, Corn Cap Shaw and the Bama Works, and they're going to put in money to help redevelop Friendship Court with affordable housing and maybe some market-based housing. Now, from my way of thinking, mixed market-based housing with affordable housing is a great mix because the market-based housing helps subsidize the affordable housing.
Of course.
And you don't create a, quote, I hate to use the word ghetto, but where everybody has the same income who lives in the same place.
Sure.
The great thing about cities is you look at an apartment house, you don't know what people make in there. Mm-hmm. You don't know what rents they're paying in there. Mm-hmm. But it's part of the fabric of the community. And that's the only way we're going to solve this affordable housing crisis. It's going to take some creative zoning. It's going to take some money from governmental entities like the state with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and it's going to take private parties like Bama Works and other people are trying to step up to the plate.
It's an intriguing topic because roughly 56% of the city of Charlottesville is zoned for single-family homes. Right. And when more than 50% of the property in the city of Charlottesville is zoned for a family to live there by themselves, that's going to impact the level of density that could be evolved or established or created in the city.
Yeah, and I think that's true. The other thing is people need to think regionally. The affordable housing problem is not just a city problem, it's a county problem too. The good news is the county has more land, but the city has a lot of land too that still can be redeveloped. But you've got to go up, you got to get more dense, and that's the only way you're really going to solve it.
Do you think the University of Virginia, what role does it have to play in not only the conversation of affordable housing, perhaps the conversation of public transportation? From my standpoint, and I wrote an analysis on this on ilovecville.com, if the public transportation system in Charlottesville and Albemarle County and Central Virginia was more robust and more reliable and more approachable, then that would help solve some elements of the affordable housing crisis, because some of our most impoverished citizens could live perhaps in a Fluvanna, in a Orange, or a Louisa, and then they could rely on a bus to take them to the epicenter of employment, which is the city of Charlottesville. If in the current setting, if they move to Fluvanna, Orange, and Louisa, the public transportation is not reliable enough. So while they may get a 2-bedroom for $750 as opposed to a 2-bedroom for $1,250 in the city of Charlottesville, they are losing that savings by getting in a vehicle and spending the money on wear and tear, gasoline, and honestly, their most precious commodity, their time, which is keeping them from climbing the vertical ladder of a career.
And it's all linked together.
It's all linked together.
It's all linked together. Now, I mean, I don't necessarily like the look of the flats, the physical look architecturally of the flats, but as a concept, it's a great concept because that's really dense housing. And transit-oriented development around density makes a lot of sense. Now, I understand you're concerned about Fluvanna, but like in Fluvanna, most of the housing there is like single-family housing. Mm-hmm. So you create a kind of a sprawl mentality where you're building out farther and farther and farther. Then people make choices with their automobiles that potentially create some problems in terms of too many automobiles in the center city. So I'd rather focus, and again, I'm not on city council.
Sure.
But we're just talking about the community
Yeah.
on density. Now, should the university build more housing on grounds? That's an interesting question for council. When I first got elected to council, I said, well, the university ought to build more housing on grounds. But over time, I've kind of changed my view because I think the private sector needs to get involved like they have done. Mm-hmm. They build the housing stays on the tax base. If you build a housing on the university grounds, it doesn't stay on the tax base. Mm-hmm. So as Lloyd Snook talked about with some of his concepts, if you mm-hmm. build more commercial buildings that are higher, you create more of a tax base that can then be used to reinvest in affordable housing, maybe in other parts of the city.
And Lloyd Snook, our neighbor here in the Macklin building, he's running for city council. He referenced Keith Woodard's now extinguished or failed $80 million development on Water Street. Mr. Woodard, the developer who we've reached out on, we've traded emails about him coming on the show. He wanted to build the West End condo and home to the Charlottesville Farmers Market. Was not able to make that work. Depending on who you talk to, from Mr. Woodard's side, it was because of council. From council's side, it was because Mr. Woodard had different market conditions. That's a topic for another day. What I'd like to talk with Delegate David Toscano about is how Charlottesville and your time on council and your time as mayor in Charlottesville, why you started saying like, okay, Mitch Van Erie is going to retire. I want to get in the House. Mm-hmm. I want to go to a different level. I want to see if I can make perhaps, is it more of a macro impact?
Well, you have an impact on a larger number of people.
Right.
And of course, then once I got there, a couple of years later, I became elected to the leadership of the Democratic caucus in the House. So that became a whole different level of involvement and a whole other set of questions that were, problematic and challenging. So, yeah, I thought, well, I think I could do some things for Charlottesville in the House that I couldn't do on the council, perhaps advocate for more money for education. I haven't seen all the programming you've done here, but I marvel sometimes how candidates for the House of Delegates can spend a lot of time talking about some things, but not talking about education. That's the number one issue, it seems to me, that the state can help on. We pay for over half of the cost of education at the state level. So we need to be figuring out ways to advocate for that money coming to Charlottesville and Albemarle. That should be the number one role of a delegate in the House of Delegates, make sure that we get our fair share.
Let's create that into a sizzle reel. Harris Tolber is our director. If you guys could give whatever stream you're watching a like and share, that would mean the world to us. I think he's doing a fantastic job, and 4 people put a lot of sweat equity into putting this program together. All we ask is for a like and share. You have a number of questions coming in, and we will get to these questions, I promise you. Let's talk about some of the things that you're most proud of during your 7 terms.
Seven terms.
I mean, that is serious.
7 terms and 7 years as the Democratic leader.
Right. I mean, that is significant time there. You have a robust level of experience that you can pull from. What are some of the items you're most proud of?
Well, the thing that I think of all of the votes I've taken, mm-hmm. and maybe my entire career, the most consequential vote I took was the vote that expanded Medicaid to 400,000 Virginians. When you talk about making a difference and you push that button and it says green and 400,000 people's lives are changed, that's where you're really making an impact. And, the joke with me was, being the Democratic leader, I was campaigning for this for 5 years. I had so many speeches about Medicaid expansion that I had my own YouTube channel just on that issue.
That's awesome.
That's how many there were. So I felt like I was right in the middle of that. But there are other things that maybe people don't notice. When I first went to Richmond, I got appointed to the courts committee, and we had a bill before us that was rewriting the entire adoption statute in Virginia. No one knew anything about adoption but me. So I got...
Because of firsthand experience.
Yeah, because I got control of the bill. I got to rewrite the whole bill.
And you were a freshman.
You were
a freshman.
And I was a freshman. And as a result, I got this reputation as the person you talk to about adoption issues, foster care issues, family law issues. And so you develop this expertise that perhaps doesn't get the headlines, but in terms of making an impact, it was very gratifying because I knew I could do something right away.
We'll take a question from the audience. And guys, if you have a question for Delegate David Toscano, put it in the chat box on whatever Facebook page you're watching. We're streaming across 7 channels on the I Love CVille network. We will also archive this interview on ilovecville.com for roughly 250,000 people to watch at their convenience. The beautiful thing about this is you can do it, watch the content whenever you want on these because they're so ubiquitous and so convenient.
You want another one?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. What do you got?
We're on a roll. So,
okay.
Do you like the train to D.C.?
I do love the train to D.C.
You know how that happened?
Tell me about it.
Okay.
You're going to sizzle reel this, Harris.
All right. Shannon Valentine,
okay,
who is now the Secretary of Transportation,
okay,
was a delegate in the same class as I was. She's from Lynchburg. She wanted that train too. Meredith Richards, who's local rail advocate, had been working really hard to get this train done. But we had to put some state money in it to get it done. So Shannon and I walked into Tim Kaine's office, Governor Tim Kaine, and said, we don't care what's wrong, what the challenges you have with your budget. We need blank amount of money in this budget to get that train started. And that's how the money got in the budget. That's how the train got started. Now it's the most profitable train in the entire Amtrak network. And it was because some people were in the right place at the right time, had the ear of the governor, and got that money in the budget. That's something like I feel real good about.
I have a special place in my heart for the train. My wife, one of the most courageous people I know, I met her on an airplane. We have a satellite office in New Providence, New Jersey. Myself and the team were in New Providence, and I see this pretty girl walk into the terminal of LaGuardia Airport, which is one of the worst airports in America. And she is pacing around the terminal because, of course, we're on a 3-hour delay, and they don't tell us anything of why we're on a 3-hour delay. I don't have the gumption or the courage or the cojones to go up and talk to her in the terminal. Lo and behold, she is on the airplane with me, and the seat next to her is open. And I change seats from the back of the plane. I sit in the seat next to her because I have 74 minutes where she cannot run away from me. Okay, we're on a captive audience here on an airplane. Long story short, this was like, early July. By the end of August, she had quit her hedge fund job in New York City, where she was making good money, and left her family in Long Island and moved all the way down to Charlottesville. And she took the train down from New York City and Penn Station to the Amtrak station by Wild Wing Cafe. I have a special place in my heart for the train. If you could give us some background or some perspective on what it's like to fight for money like that, to fight for something like that to pass.
Before that, sizzle that one for him.
David Toscano's making jokes. Yeah. That was good.
Okay, so anyway, well, it is interesting because you learn over time what buttons you need to push to get certain things done. Because you can be the best advocate in the world, but you've got to figure out how to get something done. That's all about relationships. It's all about trust, and it's built up over time. A lot of people think they can just walk into a job and do it. I'm trained as an academic. That's my background. I'm an academic. I used to be a university professor. But I'll tell you, this job is not an academic job. This is a job about relationships, and you build them with time. So fortunately, In certain cases, I have the governor's ear. Terry McAuliffe was a good friend of mine, and I'll tell you the story about how I fitted him for his high school prom tuxedo.
I was going to ask you about that.
But Northam, Kane, even McDonald, and you can walk into if you have the gumption to walk into their office and say, I want to have this in the budget, and just be persistent, you can get a lot of things done, as long as you don't, try to embarrass them in the process.
You have the gift of human connection. We both share that gift. When I see that gift in somebody else, I'm immediately gravitated and drawn to it. Mm-hmm. You have the gift of charisma and confidence and a conversationalist. That's some alliteration for you there.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Talk to us about how you were able to make the connection, even with folks across the aisle from a different party, and how you go about doing that and building these long-term relationships.
Well, I think the key is really respect. You have to respect where other people are coming from. You have no idea what it's like unless you try to walk in their shoes. And Virginia is a very diverse state. You have to recognize that your biggest enemy today can be your best friend tomorrow. Because your interests, it is very hard, but your interests line up sometimes in ways you never predict. I remember one of the first, I think maybe the first year I got down there, I had a little bill for Charlottesville. I can't remember what it was about. It must have been about giving the community the ability to do something with sidewalks. We had to get it passed, and people do that all the time. And I walked into one of the members of the county's committee, who was the most virulent, conservative, right-wing, anti-gay, anti-woman person in the world. And I just sat with him and I talked to him about this bill. And at the end he said, you know what? I'm going to support this bill. And then he said to me, I'm not such a bad guy, am I? That was revealing to me because, he had this idea that I might have thought of him as a bad guy, and we really had our tussles over the years. But on that one point, he was willing to work with me.
Common ground.
And if I had come in and kind of accused of him being a jerk, I would have never gotten there. And I think that's what some people don't realize when they jump into this game. They think, I got all the answers. All I need to say it. All I need to do is say it, and they'll just bow down before me and agree with what I say. Well, it ain't going to work that way. It does take that time.
How's the game changed? How's technology impacted the game? There's a youth movement in the game. Sally Hudson running for your seat, challenged by Kathy Galvin. I mean, these two cannot be more different. Sally Hudson, very intelligent, economics associate professor at the University of Virginia, single, does not have a family. She's never held an elected position. Okay, Kathy Galvin, she's cut her teeth on council. Mm-hmm. She's gotten seasoning on the school board. She's a wife. She's a mother. And politics aside, okay, how has the game changed?
It's changed dramatically, and the big change came after Trump. I mean, I woke up the day after Trump was elected, and I was saying, I'm never going to feel like this again, because I got to change what's going on. And so what we did as a leader of the Democratic caucus, we went out and recruited a lot of new people, women, people of color. Our caucus now, people. Sometimes they criticize the Democratic caucus, but our caucus now has a large percentage of women, a large percentage of African American, Hispanics. We have a transgender delegate, and we have embraced the diversity. But the game has changed because there are new people coming in. That's good. That's really good energy. At the same time, you have to, shall we say, season it a little bit with some of the folks who've been around for a while.
And that's a question we have coming in. And first, I'm going to give you some props. Okay, I'm going to give you some accolades here. Michael Arlen says, I might be biased, but David has integrity and a life history superior to those who hold higher offices in the state of Virginia. Question, if there was an opportunity to fill the position of governor of Virginia, would you run? Also, John Updike, who's watching, good friend of this program,
yeah.
John Updike also would like to know if you would consider running for governor. Also, on Twitter, Kristen Crozet wants to know if David Toscano would run for governor. You're well liked here.
Well, that's very nice. And Michael, I think he's watching from California. So
Is
good.
He? I tell.
think so.
Let's see here.
So hi, Mike.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway,
it's amazing social media.
This is really nice. I'm really honored that he's watching today. But the governor of Virginia is one of the best jobs in the world. I mean, you can have an impact on people's life like nobody's business. But it also takes 2 years of your life to get there. That's not an easy thing to do. I think it'd be very difficult for me. I'd love to be in that position, but to run statewide and raise the money.
What kind of money are we talking? 50 million?
Probably $40 million to run for governor these days.
How's that compare to the House?
Well, I mean, we're going to see. There's a lot of money flowing into this race, which, I mean, I'd be curious to know what you think about that. I mean,
Sonia Smith gave $100 grand to Sally Hudson.
Yeah. You tell me what you think about that. That's different. I don't think in all of my time in the General Assembly have I ever seen a donation to any delegate race that was $100,000.
Really? What was the biggest you'd seen?
25 maybe.
Really? So 4 times the amount for Sally Hudson.
I mean, I can't cite you the data.
Sure.
But I don't, being the leader, I would have known about big contributions, but I don't think I've seen anything like that. So the question for you and maybe your listeners is, watchers is, does that make an impact on people? I'm just curious.
I think where it would make an impact, and I'm going to throw it back to you, is where it would make an impact is if it was money coming, and one of the city council candidates, Michael Payne, he's running on this platform. He's not going to take any money from big corporate PACs. Right. He wants to run kind of like a very micro campaign where the campaign is supported by individuals. The only way I see it making an impact if it came from a big corporate PAC.
Well, Michael Payne's not going to get money.
Well, not him, but I'm talking in general terms.
Right. Well, I think that, I think that there probably should be a cap on donations anyway. It might maybe at the $10,000 level in Virginia. In the federal level, you have a cap. Virginia's the wild, wild west. Anybody can give whatever they want, and in governor races, they give lots of money. But in delegate races, it's a little different. So that's why I think there should be a cap at $10,000. I've never received a contribution for my delegate race. I don't think in excess of $10,000. I mean, there might be an anomaly over 14 years. Now, I've received money from my PAC because I was trying to support other candidates.
Sure.
But I've never had anything that's anything close to that large. And my concern is that over time, you have individuals getting involved in these races, and they're pushing out all the low donor base, and people get alienated by that.
What do you mean by that? Because
they feel the big money is, essentially buying elections.
Understood.
Rightly or wrongly. I mean, it's funny because I've gotten contributions from people like the beer wholesalers, but I've never felt like I've ever had a vote any way other than my conscience.
Sure.
And I think that's true of most people in the General Assembly, whether they've gotten money from, I've not gotten money from Dominion in years, but whether they've gotten money from Dominion or whether they've gotten from Altria or any other
tobacco.
company.
Yeah.
Generally, people don't do that down there, but there's a perception that it has an impact. So what people define as real and as consequence, and you have to rein it in. So that's why I had a bill last session that would have capped contributions at $10,000.
That seems like a no-brainer.
It didn't pass.
Why? It didn't pass because everybody wants that big donor?
Everybody wants that big donor, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, $10,000, if it was capped at $10,000, and why I love your idea, is it manages perception. And as an owner of an advertising agency, we are in the business of managing perception. And if an elected official at the House level or whatever level, and if this person has a cap of $10,000 from so-and-so, a cap of $10,000 from so-and-so, then folks won't think, whether it's right or wrong, that this person's going to vote for these people because of the donation.
Yeah, there's too much money in politics. And I think people are becoming jaded by that fact. And I think that's why there needs to be a pushback and some limits on what people can give.
Lowell Field says, as Delegate David Toscano moves towards leaving the House of Delegates, who does he see as rising stars in the House Democratic caucus? Who's going to fill the huge vacuum left by his departure?
Oh, that's very nice of him
Good question.
to say. Great question. The good news is we got a lot of really good people. I mean, the person who succeeded me, Eileen Fillercorn, is a wonderful leader, and she's doing a great job. But you got a lot of younger people. Marcus Simon is our parliamentarian. He's really learning the rules like nobody's business, and you really have to know the rules on the House floor. One of the things I really enjoyed was to sort of duke it out with the other side on the rules and argue for the Democratic position. But you got Marcus, you got Jennifer Carroll Foy, who led the fight on ERA, another person. You've got them all over the place. They're young, they're learning the ropes, and when they learn those ropes, they're not going to be stopped.
You have some big shoes to fill.
I mean, 10D.
You had 10D, size 10D. I just look at, and I have tremendous respect for Sally. She's been on the show. Mm-hmm. I've had tremendous respect for Kathy. She's been on the show multiple times. I'd like to organize a live debate like we did with Lloyd and Michael Payne. That debate went flawlessly. Yeah, a live debate between Kathy and Sally so people can just kind of understand the human side. The good thing about this setting is there's no commercial breaks. Yeah. It's not like a 15-second soundbite that can be misconstrued. Yeah. Here's an open-ended question for you, and you can go anywhere you want. How does someone possibly fill David Toscano's size 10D shoes in the house?
Well, you just jump in and try to try to find your niche. You find a few things that you were really going to be good at. You got to recognize you can't do everything. You have to reach out to your constituents and communicate with them as much as you can. I mean, I try. I mean, I don't do as much with social media as I need to, but I've got really crackerjack staff. Erin Monahan.
She's watching now.
She watches. Yeah, she's taking notes, great. And she's going to tell me what I did wrong after it's all over with. But I've got great staff. My wife, because of her social media background. But I am going to help whoever gets elected to this seat, try to give them some suggestions as to how they may proceed. And if I were them, I wouldn't bite off too much to chew until they get acclimated to what's going on.
A question, first some accolades, and then a question. Abby Tenenbaum Guskin. She says, thank you, David Toscano, for all the dedicated service in the House of Delegates representing the people of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, and especially for your support of women equality. It's a shame it didn't pass this year. How do you feel about that, and what can be done about it?
I was very, very disappointed. And we pulled every single trick out of our bag of tricks to get it passed. Even in the last day when I put an amendment to a bill on the floor that would have gotten a vote, we thought we had a shot at getting this thing passed. We thought we only needed 2 Republican votes. We thought we could get them to vote if we could get it to the floor. We tried those last tricks, but the leadership shut us down. The Republican leadership shut us down. We're going to be back. Well, we're going to be back. They're going to be back, and next year I hope it's going to get passed. It's so important, and it was, the lobbying, the citizen grassroots efforts on this amendment were as effective. Well, not as effective. We didn't get it passed, but they were as large as anything I'd ever seen in all my time there, and they were from all over the Commonwealth. It was a great job they did.
What's it like from a personal level when you work so hard for a bill and it goes down to the wire, and you're in like the bottom of the 9th inning with runners on 2nd and 3rd, and you have your cleanup hitter at the plate, and it's a full count, and you need this guy to slap a single into right field to score the go-ahead run from second base, and it does not happen?
Well, it's very disappointing. On the one hand, you got small bills that you have, and a friend of mine said that bills are like goldfish. You love them when you have them, but when they die, you go out and get another fish. You got to do that with small bills, but big bills, that's when it really hurts, and ERA was one of them. Sometimes, though, I'm fortunate, I've never had a bill die on the House floor. That happens sometimes where you get a bill out of committee, gets to the House floor, and something happens and the bill goes down. It's very, very upsetting. But every once in a while, you have something you do on the House floor which is a real shocker and a surprise. A couple of years ago, there was a bill on energy rate regulation. They called it the Dominion bill. And when the bill got to the floor, I had introduced an amendment that would have prevented Dominion from collecting double charges on utility rates. I didn't think that that amendment would pass, and I looked up. There were 4 Republicans who voted with us, and the amendment passed. It was the first time that Dominion had been defeated on the House floor in decades, and it was so effective that the Republicans felt like they had to get on the amendment, supporting it after it passed. So they moved to reconsider the bill, the amendment. We brought up again, and they all voted for it. So it was 100-0, and you've almost never see that. You
popped the champagne then?
Popped the champagne.
Is that what you guys do?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun that day.
Ray Cadell's got a message for you. Ray Cadell says, "I've always found David pleasant and most importantly accessible." Talk about the approachability and accessibility aspect of your position. I'm sure, lack of a better phrase, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is probably sending you messages. And I would think just responding to the messages could be a full-time job in and of itself.
It is.
But you do a really good job of being approachable and accessible. I saw you, and I'll put this in perspective. I was at, I'd say probably about a month ago, at Champion Brewing Company. And I was there with my wife and son, and it was on a Saturday, and we were just spending time as a family. And the local Democratic Party at Charlottesville, Lloyd was there, Michael Payne was there, the entire party was there. And you guys came under the tent at Champion, and they gave you were clearly busy. This was right after the blackface fiasco with Governor Northam. And you spent 15 minutes or so. I wish the microphone was working a little bit better because you had some really good things to say. But you spent 15 minutes or so addressing the party, saying, this is what I know, and now I have to go jump on a conference call. My day is really busy. But you gave them your time. And that, for me, like just watching it from the peripheral, you didn't know I was watching. That, for me, like meant the world. I looked up to you for that. Put that in perspective, the accessibility and the approachability.
Well, when I first ran for office, and again, you always learn over time. When I first ran for office, my line was this: I want to give a voice to people who feel voiceless. My idea at the time was that the people who felt voiceless were the poor and the folks who are not powerful. I found out on city council that lots of people feel voiceless, and it isn't linked to economic status. There are a lot of people out there who feel they're not being listened to, and they really want to be listened to. So when Ray says that, that's the ultimate compliment, because I tried very hard not just to reach out to folks who you would typically believe would be
important allies. Yeah, understand.
I would reach out to people who might not ever show up to a city council meeting because maybe they were afraid to go there.
Right. Maybe they couldn't get there because of transportation.
Or there was a transportation issue.
Right.
But without regard to race, economic class, social status. And I tried to build my career on that. And I still try to do it. I mean, nobody's perfect at doing this job, so you fall down every once in a while, but you keep reaching out because otherwise you really don't know everything that's going on.
Biggest regret?
Biggest regret that I don't have more time.
Yeah.
That I didn't have more time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I love that. I got a question for you on your page. With all the, and I'm going to paraphrase here, with all the controversy, with the governor, with the attorney general, with the lieutenant governor, and I'm paraphrasing, does Delegate Toscano still believe the Democrats should be optimistic? What's his thinking on the political playing field in Virginia right now as a result of what transpired in February? That's a good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It was my view that prior to the events, that the Democrats were in position to take not just the House of Delegates, but the Senate as well. There were several reasons for that. Well, one is the Trump factor.
The White House.
Yeah, the White House. But secondly, the redistricting case looks like it's going to be resolved in the favor of the Democrats, which means that a lot of districts that were racially gerrymandered...
Like the 5th.
Yeah, well, that's the congressional. But in the state... A lot of the districts that were racially gerrymandered around Richmond and around in the Hampton Roads area would have more Democratic votes in the competitive districts. And so I thought the Democrats would be able to win and take the majority. Now, this has interjected, the Northam stuff has interjected some complexities in that because there are members of the Democratic constituency that are split apart by this. There are some African American members who may not want to come out and vote for a Democrat this time. And you've got the Justin Fairfax situation with women setting up a fissure between women and African Americans. It creates complexity.
It's a dichotomy.
Yeah, but I still think Democrats have a good chance because generally speaking, these House races are often decided on local issues, like a road in the area or what your schools are like or what have you. I think they play more of a role than people think. Right now, because Trump is in the White House, everything is nationalized. But still, people come back to vote for people that they know who are going to tackle the issues that they care about in the local community.
That was a great answer. That's a sizzle reel right there, Harris. That answer right there, that was on point. How has social media impacted the game?
Huge. Everything happens too quickly.
Yeah.
Too quickly. So take Northam, for example. Maybe we should have slept on that issue overnight to see what happened the next day.
Well, it seems like even on both sides.
Yeah.
You know, he jumped to conclusions initially, you know, where he apologized.
Right.
And then the next day he comes out and says,
This is
that's not me. And then the media, you know.
That's right.
Talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, if you think about it.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
No. No, in the old days, people would have slept on it.
Right. Because they would have waited for the newspaper to come out.
They would have waited for the newspaper to come out. They would have thought a little bit more. They probably would have called a bunch more people. But everything happens so quickly now, and once it gets out, it's hard to get back. That stuff is there forever. You know, I do some lecturing to folks about how to be effective in working with legislators, and one of my rules is, you know, that Twitter and Facebook is for kiddie videos and weddings. Because if you put too much out there, it comes back to haunt you.
Yeah.
And but you can't get around it now.
Right.
It's there. And so now everybody's tweeting about what I just said.
Is there? Gail Marie Marianne Dieter Jean says, David Toscano is the one we need now more than ever. Congratulations on a phenomenal career.
Oh, thank you. That is so gratifying.
Does
Thank
the
you.
transparency piece of the social media, is there a positive there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But now people are getting so sophisticated that you can hide stuff too. I mean, look at the way Trump uses the way he uses that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of fake stuff in that. So even though he can communicate with a lot of people and it looks transparent because it's out there, is it real?
I got to hear the Terry McAuliffe story.
Oh, so the Terry McAuliffe story is, I grew up in Syracuse, New York, and so did Terry McAuliffe.
Okay.
He's a couple of years younger than me. He went to the Catholic high school that's about a mile away from the high school I went to, all right? And one day we got to talking, and he says, yeah, Toscano, is that your dad had the formal wear store? And I said, yeah. He said, yeah, well, we got all our prom tuxedos there. He said, yeah, you know, Governor, I was a couple of years older than you, you know, and I was working in the store all the time. He said, yeah, I'm sure you fitted me for my high school prom tuxedo. And so he makes jokes about inseams, and I make jokes about how I sized them up a long time ago. And we run the routine when we're in public settings. So.
That is a good story. Harris Tolbert, let's sizzle reel that story right there. What are some of the relationships that mean the most to you? With colleagues, maybe across the aisle, maybe in the same party?
Yeah, I have some really good relationships with people on both sides of the aisle, and you know, good friends that I'll just call up and, you know, rant to or compare notes with, and folks that I work on the budget. Chris Jones is a guy from Suffolk. He's the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. He's a Republican. We have talks all the time about what should be in the budget, and you know, he's in a position where he can help me get stuff in. So, like last year, for example, you know, I'm really interested in energy. We haven't even talked about energy, but my view is that the key to the future of energy in this country is to solve the problem of how you store it when the sun don't shine and the wind don't blow. That's batteries. So I put in a resolution. I asked for a budget amendment last year to get a study going. So how do we configure ourselves, Richmond, to be a leader? You know, I don't think that was going to get in there, but because I knew Chris, I was able to get it in there. So that's the way you get stuff in. And those relationships are really important. And then he'll ask me for some help on something else. And as long as the interests line up, it works.
That's a sizzle reel, Harris. When you guys are just hanging out, you're having lunch, maybe you're having a something brown.
We have lunch at our desks while session is on.
Okay, this is the question I have for you. When you're not in session, whether it's you're having something brown, whether you're on the golf course, you're just having a good time. Are you talking shop?
Sometimes.
Yeah. What are you talking about when you're not talking shop?
You're talking about the Speaker of the House is a big Yankees fan, you know, and I grew up in upstate New York, so I'm a Yankees fan. So we talk about the Yankees. In fact, I have much more in common with him talking about the Yankees than any political thing. But that's what we talk about. Or you talk about your kids, or you talk about, can you believe that this person did this? Can you believe that happened on the floor? Or, you know, it's just small talk, just like most people do when they're working.
Do you have any concerns, and if you do, what they are? Say my son who's 1 year old. Okay, the world is his oyster. Okay, the generation just being born. What are you worried about with them?
Well, I'm worried about two things. One, I'm worried about whether there's going to be sufficient resources to give him the education that he needs. And I'm worried about what the planet's going to look like, because we're not paying attention to this climate change issue. We got too many deniers out there, and we're seeing the potential impacts of sea level rise in Virginia and all over the world. You know, that's why I've worked for years on energy. I worked on a bill last year that will allow Virginia to use money from being involved in a regional compact to cut down on carbon emissions, to reinvest in Virginia rather than have the money go to the utilities. So these are things that long term, I mean, if we don't have a climate that can survive, it's going to be chaos. And your son is not going to be the beneficiary of that.
How do we fix it?
You got to have people step up and be involved in the political process. Right now, we've got a Congress that's controlled, well, at least in the Senate, by people who don't believe in climate change. You know, in the state.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
Like, how do people not believe in climate change?
They don't believe in science, which is the weirdest thing in the world. It really is the weird. No, basically they are captured by their own political interest groups, who don't let them move outside where they need.
So you're saying they're just not being authentic or true to themselves. They believe in climate change and understand the science behind it, but because of perhaps money backing them in the whatever race they're in, they can't speak up.
Well, you know, there's some cynicism in that argument. And I have some of that cynicism.
We all do.
But sometimes I feel like, you know, that they really, because they've been stuck in their bubble for too long, they haven't been able to really assimilate the information. And I got to hope that if you keep talking to them and you keep presenting the arguments and you keep presenting arguments in a way that doesn't vilify them or demonize them, they'll come along to your point of view. I'm the ultimate rationalist, right?
I love it.
I'm not sure it's going to work, but it's the only shot we have.
That's how I am. Let's call that climate change in a sizzle reel. That's a good one. And I'm going to try, what we try to do is work Harris into the show as we help grow this fantastic member of our team, Western Albemarle graduate, James Madison University graduate. Harris, we'll go to you in a matter of moments so you can, get your question ready to go. I got a couple more for Delegate Toscano. We're at the 60-minute marker, and I'm going to be very mindful of your time. First, at the local level. Charlottesville, Virginia in 2019 versus when you first arrived. Better, worse, what needs to change, the positives and both sides of the coin.
It's better. We have to figure out a way we can listen to each other. What I've seen in the last year and a half at city council meetings have been very disturbing to me. Now, I've been reading a lot about civility. I've been talking a lot about civility and listening a lot about civility. And I understand the argument that people make that sometimes civility can be used as a way to oppress people. But you have to have some rules for how you deal with people, or it becomes a contest of mobs. And we can't have a contest of mobs in this country. That's why Madison set up the Constitution the way he did. So I think that long term, we got to figure out better ways to relate to each other. If we're going to address the problems in Charlottesville. We have huge inequality problems.
We certainly do.
All over the country.
I'm fearful it's going to turn into San Francisco, Charlottesville.
Well, it could, but beyond that, it's all over the country too. I mean, in Virginia, we really have two states. We have, well, I guess you could say, Northern Virginia and Charlottesville, because they kind of look the same. And then you have the rest of Virginia. The rest of Virginia is not doing anywhere near as well as Charlottesville or Northern Virginia.
Right.
And that dynamic is not productive for the state either. So you look at these things and you say, long term, you got to solve these problems. Some of them got to be solved at the federal level, tax policy and such.
Harris, you jump in here in a matter of moments. I'm going to throw this to you, and I'm going to give some firsthand anecdotal for myself, and then learn from the maestro, which is you. Okay. I initially, with the statues in Charlottesville, I initially was like, if we move the statues, it's not going to change history. History is beyond us. Let's move forward. These, if we take them out of the parks and put them in a museum, it's not going to change anything. And then I was here watching A12 firsthand, and I saw the negativity and the evil and the sin. And then I've seen how these statues, well, not personally for me, but for friends and colleagues and associates, how impactful they are. And my mindset has changed. And I think that's what humans need to do, is we need to evolve in our thinking, and we can't be just so rigid and like, I think this, and I'm not going to think anything else, despite what the marketplace is saying or what my neighbor's saying or what I'm learning from so-and-so and so-and-so. My mindset's changed now. And my mindset is, look, these statues have caused A12. These statues have caused pain for people. Let's get them out of public parks. Places that should be places of joy and happiness, and a place to share a picnic and a lunch with whoever you want to share. And let's put them in museums, perhaps, where they belong. That's kind of the mindset that is the mindset I have now. I'm curious of yours.
Well, yours and mine are not that dissimilar. When this first started happening, I said, well, wait a minute here. How upset are people about these statues? And so I talked to a lot of people, including a lot of African Americans. And I tell you, if you'd done a poll at the time this all started, I think people in Charlottesville would have voted to keep the statues up and use the statues as a way to educate people about the Civil War and the aftermath. Because there is an incredible amount of work that needs to be done there. People have no idea. They have no idea that in 1881, a biracial coalition basically took over state government in Virginia in the aftermath of the Civil War. But within 2 years, the conservative counter-revolution had basically destroyed all that. And then in 1902, with the Constitution, they wiped out any gains that the blacks had gained at all. That history has to be told, and there's got to be a way to tell it. Now, statues may not be the way. There may be other ways, but you've got to tell that story, because we'll repeat it. I mean, there are elements going on right now with voter suppression that remind me of what happened in the 1880s and then in the early 1900s before the Voting Rights Act. So you got to figure out a way. But after August, everything changed, because at that point, the white supremacists had made the argument to take down the statues. Now they were their statues. That's why those things got to come down. That's why I put the bill in that would made it easier for us to do it. Now, it didn't pass, right. But I think a bill like that can pass if there's a Democratic majority. And I think that it will allow Charlottesville and other places to take those statues and put them somewhere else. So that's how mine has evolved.
That was good. Sizzle reel that, Harris. And then we're going to jump you in with a question, and then I'll close with my final question, because we want to be mindful of his time. Harris Tolber is our director, James Madison University graduate, Western DowntownMall graduate. Harris Tolber, my friend, my amigo, the show is yours, sir.
All right. Well, just to backpack on what Delegate Toscano was just talking about, I totally agree. I think that, education is key. Our youth needs to be educated about American history, about what has gone on. And I think that, I think that can be done. I think the statues are an example of that, especially I think if they're put in a museum, because then, people can still understand the history, right? And like you were saying, it's incredible to believe that, in the last 100 years of this world, something even such like as World War II and the genocide that happened there occurred. I mean, that was only 100 years ago in Germany, and 100 years before that, and in the history of our country, last 500 years, all the atrocities that have occurred. So it's important to educate ourselves about those things so that we don't repeat them. I also want to say it's super, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, because it's inspiring to see how a man such as yourself decided, I can make a difference for people. I want to make a difference for people, and then you went and made it happen. Right. And it's inspiring for a young guy like myself to see that. So I appreciate that. And I guess if I have one question, it would be, is there a specific memory or anecdotal story about maybe a time that you interacted with somebody who was the positive, beneficiary of an issue that you were fighting for, and how did that make you feel? And was it inspiring to keep fighting for those things?
Sure. So every year, a group called a group of union folks called SEIU comes down to the General Assembly. These are home care workers. They don't make a lot of money, $9, $10 an hour. Most of them African American. They have really hard jobs. And I would always go to speak to them. It'd be so inspiring to me, because I was crusading to try to increase the minimum wage, which would probably raise their wages too. And they were so genuine, and they were so appreciative of what I was trying to do. It just made me feel, this is why I do this work. And you have that happen all the time. The person who got on Medicaid comes up to me the other day and says, "Thank you, Mr. Toscano, because now I've got access to health care for my family I didn't have before." That makes it all worthwhile, and I wouldn't give it up. Wouldn't have given up for the world.
I love it. I love it. This is my last question, and we'll close. Harris, good job. That was a good question. My final question for you is one you can go anywhere you want. Your legacy. What would you like your legacy to be as a public servant and as an elected official?
That I worked hard to get things done, that I did accomplish a good number of things, and I did it with integrity. At least I hope that's what people think. And, if you got your integrity and you can do some good things in the process, I think you've done a great job with your life. At least I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Crushed it. This was fun. I appreciate you.
Anytime.
Thank you very much, guys.
The swag.
Oh, yeah. Guys, let's go to the one shot here. He gave me some merch here, some very cool merch.
Yeah.
Tell me about the coffee mug.
The coffee mug, it's got my name on, Democratic leader, and it's to commemorate the wave election in 2017, where we picked up 15 seats and almost took the majority, but for a coin toss in the House of Delegates. So we put together these mugs, and we give them out to really special folks. And I ought to bring some over for you guys, because now I think we got a couple more. And this thing is the fight for 51. This is the election this year to try to get to 51 in the House of Delegates. And I got some more here. I'll bring them by so you can have them.
Most of the time, ladies and gentlemen, there will be coffee in here. If we close a deal, there might be something brown in here from time to time. Thank you, David Toscano, for your time. You killed it. We close the show the same way every single time here on the I Love CVille Show. First, ladies and gentlemen, if you give more than you take, you will make our community and the world a better place. And you will probably win in the end anyway. So give more than you take. And then the second thing is, guys, the golden rule. And it's not about religion. I'm not going to bring religion into this. It's the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated yourself. Whether that's saying hello to someone on the street, opening the door for somebody, allowing someone to go ahead of you in traffic, just being nice. I feel like we're at a time here in Charlottesville and Central Virginia and the Commonwealth in totality where I feel like we need to embody and embrace the golden rule more than ever. Please do that. If you can do that, the Commonwealth will benefit, and that's what we're all about, leaving our world and our ecosystem in a better place than we first arrived. My name is Jerry Miller, for David Toscano, for Harris Tolber, for Judah Wickhauer, and for Lauren Linsky upstairs. This is the I Love CVille Show on the I Love CVille Network. We will, actually, we're doing a show in an hour and 20 minutes, so Harris Tolber, you have some pressure on you right now. We'll talk to you guys at 3 o'clock on the I Love CVille Network. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Great.
It was awesome. So one more thing, we get a photo for you for the package.